President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again, published on May 20, 2025 by Penguin Press, is a nonfiction book by CNN anchor Jake Tapper and Axios political correspondent Alex Thompson. The book offers a meticulously reported account of President Joe Biden's physical and cognitive decline during his presidency, the efforts by his inner circle to conceal it, and the catastrophic decision to pursue re-election in 2024, which the authors argue paved the way for Donald Trump's return to the White House. Drawing on over 200 interviews with Democratic insiders, White House staffers, lawmakers, donors, and other key figures, the book constructs a narrative of hubris, denial, and political miscalculation that culminated in one of the most consequential electoral defeats in modern American history. Below is a detailed summary of the book's key themes, events, and insights based on reviews and excerpts from sources like the New York Times, the Washington Post, The Atlantic, and others. Thesis and central argument. The central thesis of Original Sin is that Joe Biden's decision to run for re-election in 2024, despite evident signs of physical and cognitive deterioration, was the original sin that doomed the Democratic Party's chances and led to Donald Trump's victory. Tapper and Thompson argue that Biden, his family, and a loyal inner circle, referred to as the Politburo, engaged in a deliberate campaign of denial and obfuscation, shielding the president's declining health from the public, Democratic allies, and even members of his own administration. This cover-up, described as gaslighting the American people, involved tightly controlling Biden's public appearances, manipulating media interactions, and dismissing concerns about his fitness as politically motivated attacks. The authors contend that this strategy not only misled voters but also delayed the Democratic Party's ability to pivot to a stronger candidate, ultimately handing the presidency back to Trump. The book frames this saga as a Greek tragedy, where Biden's efforts to avoid his political fate, defeat by Trump, ironically sealed it. The irony is underscored by Biden's 2020 campaign promise to serve as a bridge to the next generation, which he abandoned by pursuing a second term. The authors suggest that Biden's decline was not a sudden development but a gradual process that began as early as 2015, following the death of his son Beau, and became increasingly apparent during his presidency. They argue that the decision to run again was driven by a mix of personal pride, familial loyalty, and the belief among Biden's inner circle that only he could defeat Trump, despite mounting evidence to the contrary. Key events and timeline. Original Sin traces Biden's decline and the cover-up through a series of pivotal moments, with the June 27, 2024, presidential debate serving as the climactic turning point. Below is a chronological overview of the key events and periods covered in the book, based on the sources. Early signs of decline, 2015 to 2020. The book suggests that Biden's cognitive and physical challenges may have begun as early as 2015, following the death of his son Beau from brain cancer. This personal tragedy, according to Tapper and Thompson, marked the beginning of a noticeable decline in Biden's mental acuity, though it was not widely discussed at the time. During the 2020 presidential campaign, Biden required significant accommodations, such as teleprompters for interviews, due to the remote nature of campaigning during the COVID-19 pandemic. These measures masked early signs of frailty, allowing Biden to project competence while campaigning from a controlled environment. The authors note that voters and some Democratic insiders were already concerned about Biden's age and fitness by 2020, but these concerns were downplayed by his campaign team, who framed him as a steady, experienced leader compared to Trump. The presidency and growing concerns, 2021 to 2023. Once in office, Biden's physical and cognitive limitations became more apparent to those who interacted with him closely. The book cites anecdotes of Biden struggling with memory, communication, and physical mobility, such as taking small steps or shuffling at events. A key example is a December 2022 incident involving Jon Favreau, a former Obama speechwriter and host of Pod Save America. During a White House visit, Favreau found Biden in his old office, charming his family and recalling details from a past fundraiser. However, this moment of lucidity contrasted with other instances where Biden appeared disoriented or fatigued, highlighting the inconsistency of his condition. The book alleges that Biden's inner circle, including aides like Annie Tomasini, Anthony Bernal, Bruce Reed, Mike Donilon, Steve Ricchetti, and Ron Klain, described as Prime Minister Klain for his outsized influence, took extraordinary measures to shield him. These included scripting answers for interviews, manipulating Zoom calls, and limiting unscripted public appearances. The authors claim that Biden's team altered the Democratic primary schedule to begin in South Carolina, a state where Biden had strong support among Black voters, to bolster his re-election campaign and marginalize challengers like Bernie Sanders. This move is presented as evidence of strategic manipulation to prop up a weakened candidate. By 2023, concerns about Biden's health were growing among donors, lawmakers, and even some administration officials. But these were dismissed by the Politburo as disloyal or exaggerated. The book cites Emanuel's outburst at a retreat, where he urged Ron Klain to convince Biden to drop out, to no avail. The Hur report and mounting pressure. Early 2024. The February 2024 release of Special Counsel Robert Hur's report on Biden's handling of classified documents was a significant blow. The report described Biden as a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory, raising public questions about his cognitive health. Tapper and Thompson argue that the White House's response, downplaying the report and accusing critics of bad faith, further eroded trust. Biden's team insisted he was fully capable, despite private discussions about his need for accommodations, including the possibility of using a wheelchair if he suffered a serious fall. The book details a June 2024 fundraiser hosted by George Clooney and Julia Roberts, where Biden's frailty was starkly evident. Clooney reportedly felt a knot in his stomach, watching Biden shuffle and struggle to recognize him, despite their long acquaintance. A moment where Barack Obama had to guide Biden off stage after a conversation with Jimmy Kimmel was dismissed by Biden's team as him basking in the crowd's support. But Tapper and Thompson call it a cheap fake cover-up. The June 27, 2024 debate debacle. The first Biden-Trump presidential debate, moderated by Tapper and CNN's Dana Bash, is the book's narrative climax. Biden's performance, marked by confusion, incomplete sentences, and a frail appearance, shocked viewers and confirmed long-standing concerns about his health. The authors describe Democrats watching in amazement and horror as Biden struggled to counter Trump's barrage of falsehoods. The debate exposed the extent of Biden's decline to a national audience, shattering the carefully curated image of competence. Tapper and Thompson argue that this moment made it impossible to sustain the cover-up, as voters and party leaders could no longer ignore the evidence. The book notes that Biden's team had tightly controlled his appearances for over a year, making the unscripted debate a rare and devastating window into his condition. The fallout was immediate, with calls for Biden to step aside growing louder. Biden's withdrawal and aftermath. July-November 2024. On July 21, 2024, Biden announced he would not seek re-election, endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee. The book argues that this decision came too late, leaving Harris with an expedited timeline that David Plouffe, a Harris campaign strategist, called an effing nightmare. Tapper and Thompson assert that Harris was a suboptimal choice, constrained by her ties to the unpopular Biden administration and her cautious campaign style. They quote Democratic insiders who believed Biden's delayed exit totally effed us as a party. The book's account of the 2024 election largely ends with Biden's withdrawal, focusing less on Harris's campaign and more on the consequences of Biden's decision to run. The authors argue that this decision, and the cover-up that enabled it, directly led to Trump's victory, as voters rejected a Democratic Party that appeared out of touch and dishonest. Key figures and their roles. Original Sin paints vivid portraits of the individuals who shaped Biden's presidency and re-election campaign, often portraying them as enablers of his hubris. Key figures include Joe Biden. Depicted as a lion in winter, Biden is portrayed as a proud, stubborn leader whose personal tragedies and long career fueled his belief in his indispensability. Despite moments of lucidity, his physical and cognitive decline is a constant theme, with the authors suggesting he was unaware of or unwilling to acknowledge his limitations. Jill Biden. The former First Lady is described as blinded by love, rather than ambition, fiercely protective of her husband and resistant to suggestions that he step aside. Her loyalty is seen as a key factor in sustaining Biden's candidacy. Hunter Biden. The president's son is portrayed as a complex figure, deserving sympathy for his struggles with addiction but criticized for unethical behavior. His influence on Biden's decision-making is noted but not fully detailed in the sources. The Politburo. This group of loyal aides, Bruce Reed, Mike Donilon, Steve Ricchetti, Annie Tomasini, Anthony Bernal, and Ron Klain, wielded significant power behind the scenes. They controlled access to Biden, shaped policy, and orchestrated efforts to hide his decline, including scripting interviews and manipulating public appearances. Democratic insiders and critics. Figures like George Clooney, Ari Emanuel, and David Plouffe emerge as voices of concern, with Clooney's public op-ed calling for Biden to withdraw, marking a turning point. The book also notes resistance from party leaders who feared Trump but felt trapped by Biden's candidacy. Broader implications. The book raises fundamental questions about accountability, transparency, and the ethics of leadership in American politics. Tapper and Thompson argue that Biden's decision to run again, and the cover-up that followed, exposed systemic flaws in the Democratic Party's decision-making and the media's ability to hold power to account. They suggest that the public skepticism about political health disclosures, underscored by Biden's prostate cancer diagnosis in 2025, stems from a history of obfuscation by politicians. The authors also frame the 2024 election as a cautionary tale, warning that denying evident truths, as Biden's team did, risks catastrophic political consequences. Political strategist David Plouffe's remark that the party must never again dismiss what voters see as true encapsulates this lesson. Conclusion. Original Sin is a searing, meticulously reported account of Joe Biden's decline and the Democratic Party's failure to confront it, culminating in a disastrous 2024 election. Tapper and Thompson craft a narrative that blends investigative journalism with dramatic storytelling, portraying Biden as a tragic figure undone by pride and enabled by loyalists. While the book has been hailed as a definitive account of the 2024 election's turning point, it has also sparked debate over its ethics and focus. For readers across the political spectrum, it offers a sobering look at the consequences of denial in leadership and the fragility of democratic trust.